Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and tonight's another Conversations with Marty Ross MD. As you know, this is a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. You create the webinar with your questions, and I tried to deliver some answers. I hope they're answers that work for you tonight. But in the course of these webinars, we get to explore anything about Lyme disease, and I get to learn a few things sometimes, and I hope that you do. You learn things as well, too. So I'm glad to see that there are a number of very familiar names showing up. So that means to me that you must be getting some value out of these, and so you keep showing up. And for those of you that are new, I'm glad to see new names here as well tonight, too. So the way you participate is you can either listen in for the questions and the answers, or you can write a question to me. And the way you write a question to me is over on the right-hand side of the screen. At the bottom is a chat box, and that's where you write your question. I ask that you try to keep them brief. If they get too long, they get too complicated to deliver here, and I won't answer long questions, just so you know. Also, I post the questions on the screen for the people participating in the live version of the webinar, and if it gets too long, it actually freezes my screen, so that doesn't work well, too. Now, during the webinar tonight, I will be reading those questions out loud, even though I am posting it on the screen for those of you that are here to see. That is because in the recorded version of the webinar, the questions I post on your screen here in the live version don't show up. All right. So yes, I am creating a recording of tonight's webinar. And my intention is that I'll have that ready for you tomorrow morning, probably before 9:30 in the morning. Everyone, that's Mr. Thor back there. You will probably see him wandering around. That's one of my Basenjis. So that's Thor. I usually get asked who they are, and underneath my desk here is Halo. So you may see her pop up here and there as well, too. Anyhow, let's see what else. Oh, tomorrow morning when you get the email from me, which will be around 9 to 9:30 in the morning, in there I will have links that you can use to sign up for next week's webinar as well, too. Okay, so we have one tonight, we have one next week, and then I'm off the week after that. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. Hello, Tracy. Let's see. After 4 years on herbs for Lyme and chronic fatigue syndrome, I seem to be in remission, but now have more severe issues with histamine intolerance. This started after being on low-dose disulfiram for 3 months and off quercetin. Have you seen long-term use of NAC causing issues with the DAO enzyme? Thanks. Tracy, I have not. That's not to say it couldn't exist, but I have not seen, I have not seen that happen. One thing that I would throw out for you to consider, just to look at, and you may have considered it already too, is one of the things after you've been on antibiotics for a long time that you might develop that could be triggering excess histamines is if you get too many yeast living in your intestines from having been on antibiotics, or from having been on antibiotics that created imbalance between good bacteria, healthy bacteria, and yeast, candida yeast that live in the intestines. Sometimes even months, a year or more after you've been off the antibiotics, you can get too many yeast living in the intestines. And if you get too many yeast living in the intestines, they will trigger immune reactions. One of the immune reactions they may trigger is that the mast cells that line your intestinal tract, the mast cells, everyone, are immune cells where histamines are made, okay? And traditionally, we've always thought that they were only turned on by things we're allergic to, but we now know that infections, mold toxicity, Lyme, yeast in the intestines can trigger mast cells to get activated too and release too many histamines. So you may want to consider, is there yeast there? Let me show you an article you can look at that will help you figure out if you might have too many yeast. And let's see here. So I'm going to do a quick screen share here. All right. So, let me make that bigger. Here we go. All right. So this is my Lyme disease information site, which is Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. And in terms of where you would find information about yeast, or anything about Lyme disease, take a look at my online Lyme guide here. For yeast specifically, you can look in the yeast chapter. And here's my article called A Silent Problem, Is It Yeast? Where I go through the steps you might take to figure out if you have too many yeast that might be triggering those excessive histamines, okay? All right, let me go back here. All right, Tracy, good luck. Thank you for the question. Now, this is very interesting for Thor back here tonight. I don't know if everyone sees him back there, but he usually lays down. I don't know why he's decided to sit all upright and very alert this evening, but he looks like he's participating in our webinar. Maybe he's learning some things. He's a very interesting character, that Thor is. All right, let me go on here. All right, this is a question from Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. Let's see. Hi, Marty. I stopped disulfiram, only got to 100 milligrams, but was on it 9 months. And I'm wondering if there's any way to test whether it's still in my system without having an awful reaction. And is there any form of detox or supplement that could expedite the process just so I can feel more confident that it's gone? I'm grateful for everything you do for the Lyme community. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. So Elizabeth, there is not a test that I am aware of that we can do to figure out disulfiram is out. So disulfiram, everyone, as you all know, is many of you may know, it's a medicine that traditionally has been used to treat alcoholism that we have repurposed because we now see that it also helps treat a type of Lyme which is known as persister Lyme or Lyme germs that have gone into hibernation, basically. And this is one medicine that may be able to help with those. So there are people doing disulfiram regimens, which typically involve working up to a target dose based on your weight and then staying at that target dose for about 3 to 4 months. Now, one of the problems with disulfiram is it's extremely fat soluble, meaning it gets into your fatty tissues. Things that get absorbed into our fatty tissues can park themselves there for a while and often will take a long time to come out. There are not good studies that I have seen that tell me how long it takes disulfiram to get completely out, but it's been my impression that it's probably about a month, okay? Typically about a month. Now, if you want to help move that along, any type of treatments what may help is to do something that warms you up, that heats you up. So the act of heating yourself up tends to work to move things out of fatty tissues into the bloodstream so that they then will either be peed out by the kidneys or processed through the liver and eventually pooped out in the intestines, all right? So the way you get things out of the blood is to heat up. So what can heat you up? Well, far infrared sauna. That's one way to do it. And you could even do work up to 30 minutes 3 times a week. You could do very dry saunas, for instance. So for instance, one of my favorite places in Seattle is a spa called Banya 5 Spa that has a dry Russian style sauna that goes to 250 degrees. And I love going and sitting in there, but that would heat you up well enough too. Hot baths are another way of heating up. Exercising to warm yourself up would be another way of mobilizing them out. So those are some things to think about. Okay. All right, Elizabeth. Thanks for the question. Hello, Brenda. Let's say hello, Dr. Ross. Have you used Ubralev, the migraine medicine for any of your Lyme disease patients? Are there any natural cures for migraines? Thanks. So I have not used this drug that you mentioned here. In terms of things, natural approaches that I like to use to try to manage migraines. Number one, migraines or any kind of headache in general, people with headaches of any kind, whether it's a migraine or tension headaches, any kind of headaches, one of the cornerstone treatments to managing headaches that can make a difference is magnesium. Most of us are magnesium deficient because the food that we have is coming from soils that are depleted of minerals, okay? So magnesium, you want to use either a magnesium citrate, a magnesium malate, or a magnesium glycinate. Any of those magnesium salt forms will work. And I usually like to supplement people by having them take somewhere between 400 to 600 milligrams before bedtime. The reason I do it before bedtime is when you take magnesium, it can make you sleepy, actually. Oops, sorry, I'm just trying to adjust my leg here. So it can make you sleepy. So that's one reason to take it at night. Now, in terms of magnesium, the limiting factor of magnesium is if you, each of us has an intestine tolerance to it, meaning if we take higher amounts, it may lead to loose stools and even diarrhea. So the thing that limits you from taking more than about 400 or 600 milligrams is often you're going to get really loose stools if you go over that, okay? So that would be one thing. Make sure you're doing that, okay? Number two, one of the supplements that I have found useful for treating and preventing migraines, so this is something you would use all the time to prevent migraines, is the herb called butterbur, and that's Butterbur. Butterbur has been shown in scientific studies to work as well as various prescription prevention medicines. Okay, so it's that good. It's a 50 milligram pill, and you would want to take that 3 times a day. You have to take it daily. You have to take it every day, 3 times a day. You can't just take it here and there. It has to be as a preventive. You need to be on a good 2 weeks before you're going to see if it's going to work. Okay, now other herbs that I have tried from the natural medicine tool chest. One is something called feverfew, which sometimes might help, but I have much better success treating these with the butterbur, okay? And butterbur you can even take if you're taking your triptans, like sumatriptan, Imitrex, for instance. You can take it along with anti-seizure medicines we sometimes use for prevention, like Topamax. So it's okay to blend it with other things as well too, okay? The other thing I will sometimes do that's more of a natural treatment for people with migraines is acupuncture. Acupuncture can be very helpful for people that have chronic migraine problems, all right? So my alternative natural medicine tool chest would be magnesium in everyone, okay? You could give butterbur a try, give it at least 2 weeks before you say if it's gonna help or not. And then consider getting acupuncture, okay? All right. So, Brenda, thank you for that question. In terms of the butterbur, butterbur is not the easiest product to find, I discovered. So let me do a quick screen share here for you. Okay, so in terms of, this is my supplement store. This is where any product I recommend, if you're looking for a source for it, you can find it here. And this is also where my patients get their supplements as well too. And anyone can use this store, okay? So my butterbur product, word butter up there, is this product made by Integrative Therapeutics called Petidolax. And this is the butterbur, okay? All right. So again, 50 milligrams 2 times a day, okay? All right. Thanks for the question, Brendan. Hello, Sarah. Say hi, Dr. Ross. I get a lot of aching in my muscles after exertion, and I recognize that this is mitochondrial dysfunction due to chronic Lyme and Bartonella infections. My question is, have you had people who have resolved this problem and can now exercise without pain? The answer is yeah, I have. And there's actually, it is probably more the mitochondria dysfunction, although mitochondria dysfunction may be one aspect of it. So everyone, your cells have energy factories in them called mitochondria, all right? And we estimate that every cell has about 300 to 400 mitochondria. Inside mitochondria is where sugar and fat are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions to create a type of cell fuel, which is something called ATP, okay? And when you have chronic infection or you have mold toxicity, there is an overproduction of oxidizing agents by the immune system that may damage the covering of the mitochondria. If the covering, which is a phospholipid fat layer of the mitochondria, gets injured, then you get sluggish energy generation, right? In addition to the achiness and fatigability you describe, often people will have a lot of fatigability, meaning they won't just be fatigued, but when they start moving, they get exhausted or their muscles get extremely weak, okay? Other things, though, that can lead to achiness in Lyme are inflammation of the muscles from Lyme. So part of an achiness treatment program, in addition to addressing the mitochondria, would be to be on anti-cytokine herbs. And as many of you know, my preference on that is to use a product by Thorne called Mariva 500, 500 milligrams, one pill 3 times a day. That's curcumin that gets inside of white blood cells and decreases cytokine production. And then the other thing that is helpful is magnesium. So remember I said everyone probably has some magnesium deficiencies in our society. And so I would, especially if you've got a lot of muscle achiness, is try to take that 400 to 600 milligrams a night of magnesium that I was just talking about earlier for migraine management. Okay. All right. In terms of mitochondria repair, I'll show you an article here in a second. I've written about that, but there are some essential components to doing it. So when you get mitochondria dysfunction, we recognize that it probably means you have injury to the covering, all right? And so you want to fix that covering, and you want to use phospholipid fats to rebuild that covering, all right? So the company I use these days that has products that help do that repair is Research Nutritionals. They have one product called ATP 360 that is made up of those phospholipid fats. It's a newer product for them, and they've got great science showing it actually helps with energy, and it actually helps improve thinking as well too, okay? And that's 3 pills 1 time a day. Now that has a bunch of micronutrients in it that help the mitochondria too, including coenzyme Q10. Now, if you are on somebody that's on atovaquone, Mepron, or Malarone to treat babesia, you do not want to take ATP 360 because the coenzyme Q10 in that will interfere with the atovaquone actions, okay? So what you can use instead is another Research Nutritionals product called NT-Factor, and NT-Factor Energy specifically. And it has phospholipids in it, but doesn't have the coenzyme Q10. And if you do that product, it's 2 pills 3 times a day, okay? Now, whatever you're doing to repair the mitochondria covering, you've got to give it at least 2 months of a trial before you decide if it's going to work or not. Other steps to take to repair the mitochondria is you need to fix them from the inside, fix the injury from the inside. And what does a good job of doing that is glutathione. And so I usually will have people on glutathione, 1 teaspoon a day. My product I like for that is Trifortify by Research Nutritionals. That's TRI-FORTIFY, Fortify. And then if you happen to be somebody that does not eat red meat, you're probably going to be low in levels of a chemical called carnitine that is used by mitochondria to carry fat across its covering to the inside so it can be burned into cell fuel, in which case, if you are vegetarian, to fix mitochondria, you should also be on a product called acetyl L-carnitine, and that's 500 milligrams twice a day for 1 month. Then you decrease it to 500 milligrams a day after that, okay? And then finally, if you really want to do the full court press, coenzyme Q10 can help, 400 milligrams twice a day. The minimum package would be glutathione along with the ATP 360 or NT-Factor. But if you can afford to do other things, I would throw in the coenzyme Q10. And definitely if you are a vegetarian, I would add in the acetyl L-carnitine as well too. Okay? All right. So let me just show you. I'm going to do a quick screen share here again. Wait a minute. I thought I was going to do a screen share. What am I doing? There we go. Okay, so in terms of, again, I'm back at my Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD website here. in terms of how do you repair mitochondria. If you want to read more about this, take a look at my energy and fatigue section here. And here's an article I've written about how do you fix mitochondria to get energy. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Sarah. Hello, Dave. Hi, Dr. Ross. Can you have a normal C4A level results and still have mold toxicity in your system? Or does a normal C4A mean no mold toxins? Thank you. It's a good question. So C4A, everyone, stands for complement type 4A. Complements are proteins that are made by the immune system to fight infections. They are different than antibodies. They are different than white blood cells. It's a whole other germ fighting system called the complement system. It will be elevated in two situations. C4As can be elevated for if you have a chronic Lyme in you. They also can be elevated if you have mold toxicity in you. It's not always elevated, though, if you have mold toxins in you, and it's not always elevated if you have Lyme in you. So yeah, you can still keep having mold toxicity even if that is normal. All right. Thanks for your question, Dave. Hello, Mrs. Lyme Tremor Recoverer. Let's see. A while back, you mentioned that Lyme and or Bartonella get into the limbic system of the brain to cause the tremors. Can you describe in more detail how the tremors develop? I have all of your products recommended for tremors. They do help. As I have healed during this past year, the middle of my body has quieted down, but my hands and feet still shake a little. I am now on Cascon and Otobabark for more than 3 months, then onto Biocide and LSF for another 6 months or so. Lastly, the cinnamon oregano clove combination is pretty strong for me. Can I take that just once a day? Okay. So everyone, the cinnamon oregano clove combination that I call it Mrs. Lyme Tremor Recoverer. I call you MLTR. What that is there's a product made by a company called Doctor Inspired Formulations that is liposomal cinnamon clove oregano essentials, and it's made up. All of those oils are shown to be effective against persistent Lyme and persistent Bartonella, based on research that was done by Johns Hopkins University over a number of projects done by Johns Hopkins University and Dr. Ying Zhang in his lab over the last few years. So I've been using it as a means of treating for the persister forms, especially of Bartonella, but also of Lyme as well too. And it can break up biofilms. If you find it to be too strong, you could try to take just one a day. They think that you could get benefit from doing that. Okay. In terms of the actual pathophysiology, I can't give you a full explanation of that, other than I recognize it does happen with Bartonella, and I recognize that as I get people through Bartonella, often that all quiets down. Okay. So I'm glad to hear that a lot of that is better for you. The tremor is a function of nervous system agitation. Okay. Now, it is also possible there are other types of tremors that people can get that are not Lyme related. So there is something called an essential familial tremor, where you will start to, as you start moving things with your hand, you get tremors as you're moving. Okay. Versus Parkinson's tremor usually is a tremor that's at rest. People will just have their hand will shake when they're at rest, and it tends to go away as they start using their limbs. Okay. Now, this thing called an essential familial tremor often will be seen in family members. So that's one way to see if you might have it. In addition, it's one of those things that gets better with alcohol, actually. So sometimes people that have this condition bad might do a lot of drinking just to get it to stop. And I've actually had people, when I used to working with homeless people in Washington, D.C. when I first got out of residency training. And as many of you know, a lot of those people, unfortunately, have mental health problems as well as substance abuse problems. But I one time ran into and started helping a person that had been a professional trombone player that basically developed tremors. And so he started drinking alcohol to quiet the tremors. And eventually he got hooked on the alcohol, unfortunately, and he lost his whole career and everything. But, you can use alcohol to quiet these. Not that I'm recommending that, all right? But if you happen to have a tremor that gets quieted with alcohol, that usually can be a sign that it is essential familial tremors. If it is an essential familial tremor, what works better for it to quiet it can be heart medicines called beta blockers can make a difference for that. So my suggestion to you would be is if you've gotten a lot of your tremors and shakes to go away by managing the Lyme and Bartonella, and yet this still remains, you may want to go talk to your primary care doctor, family doctor, general internist. They don't even have to buy that you have Lyme. Just go talk to them. And if it's a kind of tremor that is a tremor that occurs with motion as you're doing stuff, see if they have, I could try a beta blocker for you and see if that might make a difference for you. Okay. All right. And let's see. Yeah, I think I answered your questions. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Tammy. Hold on here just a minute. All right. Hi, Dr. Ross. I was taking 500 to 1,000 milligrams of curcumin and 800 milligrams daily of quercetin when I received my first COVID vaccine. The second dose, I stopped taking them a week before and 2 weeks after. Is it possible that I decreased the effectiveness of the first vaccine due to taking these supplements? My teenage son has been treated with multiple combinations of antibiotics and recently added herbals for Bartonella and Babesia for 2.5 years. Each time we test with Igenix and Galaxy, his results remain positive. He is doing well other than what appears to still be Bartonella rash on his back and also OCD. You have mentioned in the past not to keep testing for infections. How do we decide when it's time to stop treating for the infection? Is Bartonella rash an indicator that infection is still active, or can it remain afterwards? Okay, so there's two questions here. So first of all, let's talk about the COVID vaccine. So as many of you know, when you get the COVID vaccine, I have been recommending to try to limit taking your anti-cytokine medicines before you get the vaccine, and then trying to stay off of them for at least 2 weeks after you get the vaccine. Now, I'm making that recommendation on a theoretical basis. There's no science that says it makes any difference, but here's why I make that recommendation. So when you get the vaccine and the vaccine turns on your cell production of a protein called the spike protein, where your cells start becoming a spike protein production factory for the spike protein that's found on the COVID. Those spike proteins then get seen by your immune system, and the immune system has to activate to develop antibodies and eventually T cell memory, T white blood cell memory about those, so they attack them if you should get a real COVID virus infection, okay? What turns the immune system on initially are cytokines. Remember I've described cytokines before in the world of Lyme, that they're good and bad. On the good side, when your immune system sees a germ or a COVID spike protein or a Lyme germ or a yeast, some of those white blood cells will start manufacturing cytokines. And initially, cytokines are good. What their job to do is to turn the immune system on to deal with that problem. So with a COVID vaccine, we want the immune system turned on to deal with COVID, all right? So my thoughts were, why would you want to block the response of the immune system, okay? Now, in theory, it is true that quercetin and curcumin may limit that response. To be honest with you, I have no idea of knowing how much of a limitation it is. nor do I have any idea about whether it blocks the actual, truly blocks the effectiveness of those vaccines. What I have expressed to everyone before is if to give yourself the best chance of getting thoroughly vaccinated, try not to be on those around the time of the vaccine, beginning a week before through 2 weeks after, okay? Now, does that mean that your first doses didn't work? They probably did work. I have no way of knowing whether it was partially dampened, but I can tell you your second dose would have been enough probably to overcome that. So I think you're probably going to be fine, all right? All right, in terms of Bartonella testing and of Lyme testing, so any test that looks to see how your immune system is reacting, so that would be either Western blot, antibody testing, the Galaxy Lab IFA test, and also your elispot test. All of those tests are looking to see whether your immune system is still reacting against the germ. And what I have said before is that immune reaction testing is not a reliable indicator whether the germ is in you or out of you. It's just not, okay? What could be useful, though, is Galaxy does another test, which is called a PCR test. Now, the PCR test looks to see, is there the genetic material of the germ in you? Not are you having an immune reaction, but is the actual genetic material of the germ in you, all right? And it is, if you have the genetic material in you, it's still going to be in you for two reasons. One is you've got dead debris of the germ that hasn't been cleaned up yet, but usually that will get cleaned up by your immune system, okay? Or number two, you got living germ in you. So in my opinion, if you get a repeat PCR test that is positive, then that is a sign that you actually have Bartonella active in you, and you probably should still keep treating, okay? Dr. Mozignani recently, as I understand, has now got a new microscope TLab test where he's doing some PCR markers, I believe, to see if Bartonella is there. If it's one of his TLab tests where he's looking under the microscope to see if he can see the Bartonella, and he sees it still there, then yeah, you still have it, okay? The question I have with all of these, though, whether it's a PCR or Dr. Mozignani and his new TLab microscope, is if it's not seen on a TLab test, and if it's not seen on PCR, that does not mean it's still not there. It just may mean they didn't see it. They didn't get a sample of blood where they could actually detect it, okay? But on those tests, if it is being seen, just these are the ones that can look at, is it living in you, not an immune reaction, but is it living in you? So the TLab test or the PCR test through Galaxy, those would say you probably still need to keep treating, okay? Now, the other thing I will do in terms of my Bartonella testing, if I've got somebody that has the Bartonella stretch mark, striae kind of rash that many of you are familiar with, those don't always go away as you treat. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. But I want to be sure that when I stop treating, that somebody is not getting new rashes, okay? So the thing about the new rashes is, to me, that indicates you probably have a sign of active Bartonella in you and that you should still be treating, okay? All right. Hope that answers your question. I hope that find that useful, Tammy. Thank you for the question. Hello, James. Let's see. What has helped underweight patients in your practice to put on weight? And what are the main problems that prevent people from gaining weight? James, I don't have a general description of what keeps you from gaining weight because it can be complicated. If somebody has a hard time gaining weight, though, just some general things I'm going to look into is what's their thyroid? Because if you have overactive thyroid, that can lead to weight loss and difficulty putting weight on. I'm going to want to hear about how their digestive system is working. And so, for instance, if they're having frequent bowel movements or they're having unprocessed food coming out, then that may mean an absorption issue. Okay, so I'm going to want to know about that. I'm going to ask questions about whether they fill up quickly, and that's why they're not eating. So they get filled up very fast, and they're just not able to get enough volume in. And that could mean problems with the stomach. That may mean ulcer disease. It could mean a whole host of things, okay? So there's more questions I would want to ask to just see if there's an underlying medical reason for not gaining the weight, okay? All right. But in terms of what is the thing that helps put weight on, it's fat. Fat is your densest, in terms of calories per unit of food. Fat is denser than protein and is more, more dense than carbohydrates are. And so it's fat that would do it. So fat would be cheeses. So full fat cheese, not non-fat cheese, obviously. Yogurt, olive oil, coconut oil. If we've got somebody that is having a hard time, peanuts, nuts, almond butter, peanut butter. If I've got somebody that's having a hard time gaining weight, I'm going to have them start emphasizing fats in their diet. Okay? All right. Thanks for the question, James. Hello, Lawrence. I see if my symptoms are improving with current antibiotics. Is there a point at which I should change antibiotics or add other ones? Or only change meds but no longer seeing improvement? I've been treating for a month and a half now and seeing lots of improvement. Also, if improving is now a good time to treat mold toxicity, thanks. So, I mean, Lawrence, these things are all things you should talk over with your Lyme practitioner based on your own particular situation. So I'm just going to give you some general things, though, okay? So the difficulty in managing Lyme or Bartonella or Babesia is finding things that are going to work in you, all right? So although there's a number of different antibiotic combinations I could give you for Lyme, or a number of different antibiotic combinations I could give you for Bartonella, or a number of them that I can give you for Babesia, that does not mean they're all going to work in you. So in my practice and the way I operate is if I find something that's getting somebody better, I'm going to leave them on it. All right. So even after a month and a half, I sometimes will leave people on things that seem to be working. I'll leave them on it for a good 6 months before I attempt to change. Okay. So that's one thought for you. If you are getting better and you think you could handle a cytokine flare, then it may be time to start adding in your binders to start treating mold toxicity, because when you start using binders to pull those mold toxins out of you, they're going to trigger a cytokine flare. And as many of you know from participating in my webinars, when the Lyme symptoms you have are actually symptoms of excess cytokines. So cytokines, again, are made by white blood cells when they see a mold toxin, when they see a yeast in you, when they see a Lyme in you, when they see Bartonella, Babesia in you. And they're good at first because they turn the immune system on. But if the immune system doesn't do a good job, eventually it's going to produce too many cytokines. And too many cytokines are what give you a lot of your problems. So too many cytokines suppress the immune system. They also decrease your ability to think. They give you fatigue. They give you body pain. They disturb your sleep centers. They interfere with how your hormonal systems work. All right. So most of what we call Lyme symptoms are actually too many cytokine symptoms. All right. So the problem when you start pulling mold toxins out is the body will interpret the movement of these mold toxins and it will react by making more cytokines. So sometimes you can flare up as you start pulling those out because you trigger more cytokines, okay? So it all depends on what you can handle at this point. All right, good luck to you. Hello, Christine. Let's see, dear Dr. Ross, my recovery from a DNC is very sluggish, and I still experience pain 8 weeks after the surgery instead of 3 to 4 days indicated by my gynecologist. This is despite taking antibiotics. I was told this is subacute inflammation. Could the slow recovery be because of Lyme? Thank you so much. So I haven't seen this particular situation occur in my practice before, so I can only theorize about this, nor has anyone done double-blind randomized controlled studies about women that get DNC that have Lyme. Okay, so I can't tell you based on any science. So, but what I would wonder is, Lyme creates an inflammatory state, as you know, right? And it's very possible that you still have a lot of inflammation going on because Lyme has overly turned on the inflammatory system. So in a situation like this, if you were my patient, what I probably would do is to see if you had any benefit by doing things to lower cytokines, like being on curcumin, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Again, I like the Thorn Mariva 500 for that. The other thing I might do is also get you on some glutathione, which is a very strong antioxidant that can repair cell damage from the inside. And as an antioxidant, it decreases oxidizing agents that trigger your white blood cells to make cytokines. All right, so it helps manage cytokines that way too. And that would be 1 teaspoon 1 time a day. Okay, all right. Thanks for the question and good luck to you. Kim says, hi, Marty. Well, hello, Kim. Hello, Lynn. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Do the herbal supplements cat's claw, otoba, hutania sidacuda, and oregano oil create microbiome imbalance? Can you tell me the best herbal protocol for addressing yeast overgrowth? And what supplements do you recommend to protect, repair the intestinal lining? And then 4, is there enough cytokine inhibition from antihistamines that I should stop Claritin before getting the COVID vaccine? Thank you very much. So I don't think there's any anti-cytokine effect from Claritin, and I think you would be okay doing that. Okay, so that's the easy part of your question here. Okay, so can herbal antibiotics like sidacuda, oregano oil, hutania, etc., create some imbalance in the intestines? The answer is yes, they might. They're far less likely to than prescription antibiotics, though, okay? So I used to think that when I would put people on otoba and cat's claw to treat Lyme that they would never have yeast problems, but I saw it happen rarely. I would see it happen, but it did happen. So I have to surmise that probably these herbal antibiotics we're using may be knocking down some good bacteria, allowing yeast to grow. Now, the oregano is interesting here because oregano is something you can use to treat yeast. And so it's possible if you knock down too many good yeast that might allow other bacteria to grow. I don't know, maybe you get some imbalance that way, but in theory, that could happen, okay? All right. Number 2 is, can you tell me the best herbal approach for addressing yeast overgrowth? All right, so I'd like, in terms of how do you approach yeast overgrowth, number 1, be on good probiotics. And these days, more and more, I'm moving towards having people take 2 families of probiotics. One family would be the types of germs that live in our intestines. So those would be things like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, okay? And then the other group that I'll have people take will be what are known as spore-forming probiotics. These are ones that come from the soil. They actually develop a hard spore around them, which makes it easier for them to mobilize and get into the intestines. Spore formers probably don't repopulate the intestine, but what they do is support the existing bacteria in there to be better, grow better maybe, and they also support the actions of the human-based probiotics that you're putting in, all right? So for instance, a human-based probiotic that I like to use is something called HMF Forte by Genestra. And the spore-forming probiotic that I tend to like to use is made by Research Nutritionals. It's called Corebiotic. Now, Research Nutritionals recently came out with a new probiotic product that I've started using over the last month that looks pretty good. It's a combination probiotic that has both spore-forming strains in it and also has human-based strains in it. And it doesn't require refrigeration, which is kind of nice. So this has in it lactobacillus strains. It also has spore-forming strains, and I just blanked on the type of strains, the names of their specific spore formers, but they have spore forming strains in them. And what's nice about that multi-biome product is that it has enough probiotic per capsule that you only need to do 1 pill a day. Okay, so it's multi-biome, it's MULTI-BIOME. So what I would recommend as part of an herbal anti-yeast protocol is be on at least 1 multi-biome a day, or do 2 HMF fortes and 2 probiotic 1 time a day, okay? Plus, you want to be on herbs that will kill the yeast, all right? So things herbally that can kill yeast are powder co is one, caprylic acid is another, rosemary oil, thyme oil, endolacinic acid can actually kill yeast. Garlic can kill yeast, okay? So for the longest time, the product that lately, anything in the world that seemed to have had caprylic acid in it during COVID-19 was in short supply. So products like Integrative Therapeutics Phytostan that had powder co, caprylic acid, there's another one in there, but that product stopped being made. And my other favorite one, which is a product called Capri Plus by Karuna, which has caprylic acid, garlic, and rosemary oil, stopped being produced too. But guess what? It's back on again. So we now have a big supply of the Capri Plus. I actually tend to like it. I think it's a bit stronger than how Phytostan works. But you could take a look at using that product, 2 pills, 2 times a day. Okay. I'm going to show you products here in just a minute. All right. Number 3, what's and then if you're going to do it herbal, you got to give it a good 8 weeks to get things fully under control. And herbal options will work about on their own about 80% of the time. Okay. Let's see. What supplements do you recommend to protect and repair the gut lining? All right. So in terms of the gut lining, getting yeast out is how you start repairing that. Okay. And if that does not work well enough, then sometimes you want to give people the fuel source that helps their intestinal cells work better. And that's to be on something called L-glutamine. Glutamine is the fuel source for cells. And you would take L-glutamine powder. You want to get about 15 grams or so in a day, which for most manufacturers is going to wind up being a scoop of powder 3 times a day. Okay. And then the other thing you can sometimes be on that helps repair that covering is to put mucogelatinous substances in you, like marshmallow, artichoke. I'm sorry, not artichoke, but marshmallow, aloe. Those kind of substances can make a difference too. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you some products because it's probably just easier to show you that way. So let's do a screen share here. All right. Okay, so back here at my supplement store, let's take a look at probiotics together here. There we go. Okay, so this product, Corebiotic, right here is the spore former I was telling you about. And this one down here called HMF Forte is the human strain, okay? Or you could wind up using this newer product by Research Nutritionals called Multi-Biome that has in it both spore forming as well as human strains and does not require refrigeration. This would be 1 pill 1 time a day. Okay. All right. Then in terms of treating yeast, take a look at my yeast section there. And this is now back in stock. This is Capri Plus, which is caprylic acid, garlic, and oil of oregano. It's a good combination that works really well too. And that's 2 pills twice a day on that. Okay. And then in terms of what to use to heal your gut, take a look at my gastrointestinal section here. I would take a look at this product called GI NCAP. And what GI NCAP has in it is licorice, marshmallow, slippery elm, and aloe vera, okay? And then I would also take a look at, in terms of the glutamine powder, it's this product here by Thorne, and it's their glutamine powder, and you would want to do 1 scoop 3 times a day of that, okay? All right. All right, Lynn, good luck to you. Thanks for those questions. Hello, Jackie. What are your thoughts on Rife Machines? So Rife Machines, I think, could help some people. That didn't really answer your question much, but it just says could and might. So let me talk about that a little bit more. So everyone, Rife Machines are machines that use electromagnetic frequencies that are supposed to resonate with a germ and burst it. Okay, so many of you are familiar with, like, you can take an opera singer and put her in front of a glass of water, and she'll sing at a high enough frequency that it vibrates with the glass and breaks it. Okay, same idea happens with Rife Machines. We generate electromagnetic frequency, sound wave that vibrates your germ covering and kills it. That's how it's supposed to work in theory. Okay, now Royal Rife is a guy that came up with these things called Rife Machines, and he had a super high-powered microscope where he could see that it would kill various germs. Over time, there have been people that have come up with frequency handbooks for various germs that will tell you what is the frequency that you set your Rife machine at, okay? And so you can find those. In terms of a good how-to book about rifing, how do you set it up? How do you do a session? I would Google Rife Machines and Brian Rosner. That's B-R-Y-A-N, last name R-O-S-N-E-R, Rosner, who wrote a whole book about Lyme and Rife Machines, okay? I do not agree about anything he wrote in there about antibiotics and the evils of antibiotics. I think he overstepped what the reality is. But in terms of a resource that's good about how do you rife and what kind of machines do you get, I think it's a pretty good resource, okay? Then if you're looking for a handbook about the Rife frequencies to use, there is a writer named Nina Silver, S-I-L-V-E-R, I believe, that has written a book about Rife frequencies. She's got a book out about Rife frequencies. And so it's Nina Silver, Rife frequencies, okay? If you Google that, I'm sure you'll find her books on that as well, too. Now, does it work? And is there safety issues? So part of the reason, so most physicians cannot recommend, we cannot do Rife Machines in our offices, nor can we recommend them to you. And I never do. I don't technically ever recommend a Rife Machine to anyone because the FDA has taken negative feelings about that and gone after doctors for doing it, okay? So, and the reason they do that is there are no safety studies showing that these devices actually work, and there's no safety studies that show that they are safe. Okay, so just to know that, I just wanted to disclose that, okay? Now, people do Rife Machines. I mean, they find out about them and they try them on their own, all right? And so what I can tell you is, in terms of chances for success, what I have found in my practice is that people that come in and tell me they've been rifing, as I talk with them, it seems that about 35% or so find that they get some benefit by using Rife Machines, okay? Now, what I have also am aware of is the LymeDisease.org in California has been doing a project over the last years, which is an ongoing research project they call My Lyme Data, where they have enrolled people that have Lyme disease, and they allow these people fill out a questionnaire, and they use that initial questionnaire as a basis to determine other people out of the full 12,000 or so people they have enrolled. They will periodically take a smaller group and ask them more detailed questions about a certain issue. And so I think it was 2 years ago now, their big project was looking at, do alternative medicines work? Which ones? And are there any side effect issues? Okay. And in that project, I believe that they showed that of the people that have done Rife Machines, 35% of people said that they had benefit. So I'm going to just show that all to you here. Let's do a screen share again. All right, so back over here at my Lyme information site, I'm going to just type in, I'm going to say what works. So there's an article that I wrote based upon the last 2 My Lyme data research projects. One was looking at what gets people better. And what they discovered is it's actually being on prescription or herbal antibiotics for at least 1 to 2 years. That's what gave you the best chance of recovering from Lyme. Not Rife Machines, not hyperbaric oxygen, not hyperthermia in Germany, not IV ozone. None of that is what got people well. What got them well, the unifying factor was killing germs with antibiotics, herbal or prescription, okay? In addition, in their studies, they showed that you can read my article here, but I'll just point out a line here. Rife Machines, yeah, they say they help 35% of people based on their data, okay? Hyperthermia, like going to Germany and getting your hyperthermic treatments, seem to help about 45% of people, all right? Stem cell therapy, only 3% of people thought that they got benefit from that, okay? All right. All right, Jackie, thank you for that question. Hello, Lisa. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thanks for helping those of us suffering with Lyme. You're welcome. I have continued to have leg heaviness and achiness, especially in my calves, after being treated for Lyme Barton Babesia 7 years ago. Wonder if you know of any treatment that may help. Also, after my COVID vaccine, I started experiencing a symptom I had when suffering with Lyme. I have a neurologic issue where it feels like there is buzzing in my head and I have sound sensitivity. Do you have any suggestions for treatment? Thank you. So about your legs, a couple of things to think of. One is mitochondria repair. If the mitochondria are injured, you are not going to have enough energy for the muscles to work right. You're going to have achiness. So I mentioned earlier how to repair mitochondria. Give those proposals a try for about 6 months, okay? There's a whole article you can read on my website. I'm not going to go back over it again. You could listen to the recording tomorrow if you missed it, where I described how do you fix your mitochondria, okay? All right. Second thing I would do is get on magnesium. As I said earlier, we're all magnesium deficient for the most part, and being on magnesium replacement can sometimes help with achiness, no matter what the achiness issue is, okay? All right. In terms of this neurologic issue, I don't understand why it would have come on more with the COVID vaccine. And I don't think I'm going to have a good response for you here on that one. I think I would need to ask you a lot of questions. And as you know, this format doesn't allow for that. Some things you might want to try if you haven't tried them, though, no matter what the underlying cause is. Sometimes acupuncture can make a big difference for something like that, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Lisa. Hello, LM. Do die-off symptoms differ from person to person? The answer is yes. One person's Herxheimer reaction is not another person's Herxheimer reaction. And as many of you know, Lyme symptoms vary from people too. Some people tend to have more fatigue. Some people tend to have more brain fog. Some people tend to have more achiness. And their symptoms, again, are due to cytokines. And Herxheimer reactions are due to excess cytokines being made when you kill a germ, All right. So it makes sense if Lyme looks different, and that's all due to excess cytokines, that Herxheimer reactions might differ from people because that's all about excess cytokines and how they manifest in that person. Okay. Thanks for the question. Hello, Ginger. Could Lyme disease affect degenerative joint disease? So degenerative joint disease, everyone, means that you're wearing down your cartilage in your joint. Okay. So wherever two bones come together in the body, like in your finger joint here, one of those bones, where two bones come together. So this is one bone, this is another bone. Where those two bones come together in a joint, the surface of that bone is covered in cartilage. Okay. Both would be covered. Purpose of cartilage is to allow things to glide over each other easily. And cartilage is softer and spongier than the bone it covers. So it kind of acts as a shock absorber as well, too. Right? Now, because it is softer than the bone it covers, as a result of use over time, you may wear down that cartilage. And if you wear the cartilage down, you wind up getting bone rubbing on bone, which leads to inflammation and pain in the bone. And then the bone responds by growing more bones. So sometimes you'll get bone spurs that will develop, for instance. Okay. All right. Now, could Lyme be part of that process? Yeah, it can be. So Lyme, as many of you know, hates oxygen. Lyme likes to get into tissues that have poor oxygen or poor blood flow, bringing oxygen to those tissues. And one of those would be cartilage. Okay. So what Lyme will do sometimes, what Lyme can do is make enzymes that allow it to burrow into tissues, whether it's connective tissue in your body or whether it is cartilage. And so it may lead to some breakdowns of the cartilage. And as it leads to breakdowns of the cartilage, you wind up getting bone rubbing on bone, and then you get bone spurs and you get inflammation in that bone too. So yeah, Lyme could be under that. One of the things I will do in my practice is if I'm treating somebody for Lyme and their bone pain their joint pain never gets better, I start assuming or wondering if part of the problem may be that they've got some wearing down of the cartilage. And I will wind up putting them on something called glucosamine sulfate, 500 milligrams 3 times a day. And that can help rebuild the cartilage. In theory, it can. It seems to help about 80% of the time, what I see in my practice, okay? The product I like, if you're going to do that, there's a lot of garbage glucosamine out there. So if you're going to try to see if it's going to work, you need to give it 2 to 3 months using a good quality product. I prefer a Thorne product. It's a glucosamine sulfate product from Thorne because I trust Thorne makes good quality products, basically, okay? Now, let's say it's helped you and you want to try one of the lower cost Costco brands or something like that, feel free to, and see if the lower cost brand will work for you, all right? But if you're going to try to see if something is going to work, make sure you're using high quality to give yourself the best chance to see if it does work. Okay? All right. Thanks for your question, Ginger. Hello, Kim. Let's see. I have candida for sure and have tried all of your tricks except 2 months of diflucan. I'm wondering, though, how hard it is on the body to do that, as I am so sensitive. So, Kim, I don't know of your sensitivity, so I would need to ask you more. But if you're really sensitive, instead of doing the 200 milligrams once a day, I recommend combining with nystatin pills as 2 pills twice a day. You might want to try half a strength, like a 100 milligram pill, and see if that will work for you too. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Thomas. Let's see. Can Lyme cause bipolar? 1 or 2, or is that just an exacerbation? So, in theory, Lyme can cause bipolar. Lyme can lead to mental health issues. But usually when somebody's got mental health issues, we're going to tend to think of Bartonella as being the major cause of that, okay? So, but yeah, it's possible. And it's possible Bartonella could do that too. All right. Hello, Carrie. Hello. Last month I had a deep lymphatic drainage and I was so sick for about 3 weeks afterwards. My mast cell was triggered very badly. I had chills, sweat, shakes, etc. I have little to no Lyme symptoms left, treating with mostly herbs. What happened during that massage that made me so sick? Thank you so much. I honestly don't know. I mean, other than lymphatic massage is going to mobilize lymph, and probably they were manipulating your tissues, which may have also mobilized toxins that could be stored in your fat. Something probably triggered of moving those toxins that could have been part of the lymph and in your tissues may have been enough to trigger cytokines. That's what I would wonder, but I don't have any proof of that. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Ms. Eve. Let's see. Do you test each of your patient's gut? What test do you use? What would be your recommendation for alternative health treatment of leaky gut and candida? Thank you for sharing your time and profound wisdoms. Blessings to all. You're welcome, by the way. So first of all, I don't routinely test the gut to see what the microbiomes or how the pancreas is working. So for instance, there's a GI profile test that Great Plains does. There's also a similar comprehensive GI profile that Genova Diagnostics does. I know there's the GI map that's out there. All of those tests are looking to see chemical markers for how your pancreas is working, chemical markers for whether there's inflammation in your intestines, and they're trying to get an idea by looking at some of the bacteria makeup as to whether there's a good balance or not a good balance of the bacteria, okay? I don't do those right away. The only time I will start looking at doing those is if I've got somebody that has developed a lot of GI issues and I cannot figure out what's going on, okay? And so other things that can lead, so those tests that you just described are good at looking at microbe balance and looking at pancreas function and looking at inflammation. If I've got somebody that's got a lot of gassiness or bloating, I'm going to be more inclined initially just to treat for yeast and for leaky gut, okay? If I treat them for yeast first and they don't get better, then I might start wondering, do they have SIBO or do they have yeast that's not responding to my treatment? And then I might go back and do 2 tests. One of those is a breath test to see if they might have small intestine bacteria overgrowth. And the other one would be to do a urine organic acid test, looking to see, do you have organic acids that are produced by too many yeast in the intestines? And I usually will focus on something called arabinose, okay? So initially, if I've got somebody with a lot of GI issues, I'm probably going to focus on treating yeast first. If that doesn't work, then my next thing I will wind up doing is to do a SIBO breath test from Genova Diagnostics. And I might do, it's called a MOAT test, M-O-A-T, a microbial organic acid test from Great Plains Lab to see if I can see any organic acids that say yeast. If I do all that and correct problems and things still remain, then my next step is going to be to get a comprehensive GI profile. Okay, that's my approach to doing it. Okay, all right. Now, treatment for leaky gut, I kind of covered that earlier. So on the candida side, get on a multi-biome probiotic, and then also be on an herbal like a Capri Plus. Okay. And then to treat the leaky gut, get on at GI NCAP that I described earlier tonight, and get on the L-glutamine powder, okay? And I described that all earlier tonight, so I'm not going to go back through that again, okay? All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Jackie. Let's see, is there too much such a thing as taking too many supplements? Yeah, I mean, you can take too many. You can take too many because some of them might start counteracting each other. You can take too many because they're costly as all get out to take that much. And you have to figure out, do you need all your supplements? All right. So what are you trying to accomplish? And often part of my job in working with people is to have them stop things. So I know I work with supplements, but often I have a lot of people that come to see me that have either put together treatments on their own or have worked with other doctors that promote supplements a lot more than I do. And partly what I'll do is I'll think to myself, is this really helping? So I'll ask them, do you think you got a benefit from it? And they'll say no. And I'll say, well, let's stop it. So I try to pare back on supplements because I think we can get too carried away with it, actually. All right. Thanks for that question. Hello, Lisa, again. Let's see. Hi, Doc. Wondering if you have ever heard about laser treatment for Lyme disease. There are even several clinics across the country who do this, and some chiropractors who use a form of cold laser that claim to eradicate the biofilm. What do you think? I think there's no science. There's no science that says this stuff works in Lyme, and I don't think there's any science that would suggest to me why it should work in Lyme. So this is not something I'm supportive of. Okay? All right. Thanks for the question. Hello, Kim. Let's see. I'm in Canada. No one will give you more than 2 days on a. Oh, I think you're still talking about your yeast treatment. And that's what we talked about earlier. All right. Hi, Jackie. Again, let's see. Are you currently taking new patients via telehealth? Yes, I am. So if you're interested in reading about how we could work via telehealth and the two types of options you have for that, one of those options is an option where you actually eventually do need to come see me once COVID lifts. And the other one is one where you don't have to come see me. The one where you do come to see me is the only one I can prescribe an order test on. Okay. The other one, I can give you advice that you discuss with another physician and they write the prescriptions if that's what's needed. Let me just show you how you would find information about that. I'm going to do a screen share again. All right, so click on my clinic link up here. And this brings you over to my practice website, which is Marty Ross MD Healing Arts. Look on my appointments page. And I describe the two types of appointments I offer down here. Full medical service, which is all available by telemedicine right now, and limited consult service, which will always be available by telemedicine. And look through here, you're going to see the various differences. I even describe how long do they last, how much do they cost, and then in each of them, there's forms you're going to need to fill out, okay? Read through these sections and figure out if one of these works for you. And then if they do, you can book the appointment by just clicking on this Book Now button. All right? All right. Thanks for that question, Jackie. Hello, Tanya. Let's see. How long is it safe to take cryptolepis or CSA to treat babesia? So everyone, so cryptolepis is an herb that is an anti-malarial that came to us from Ghana, as in Africa, Ghana, because it was found to be effective to treat babesia there. And it does seem to have good effect on babesia, but more recent studies actually show, out of Johns Hopkins, show that it also will help treat Lyme and persisters. Now, I'm still trying to figure out from my practice whether I think that works or not, but that's what the Petri dish experiments tell us. CSA is made up of Cryptolepis, Sida acuna, and Alcornia, And the company that carries that is a company called Woodland Essence out in New York State. They have a CSA mixture, okay? And all of those are things that can target Babesia, although, again, the cryptolepis might target Lyme as well, too, all right? How long is it safe? I don't find that there's any limit in it. I don't find that these inflame the kidney or the liver. The only thing, they may stop working, but I have been known to use these for 6 months, even up to a year or more, and have had good success using them on an ongoing basis, okay? All right. Thanks for your question, Tony. Hello, Mike. Let's see. Do all antibiotics need to be taken away from dairy products, calcium fortified beverages, or is it just the tetracyclines? It's just the tetracyclines. All right. Your clarithromycins, azithromycins should be taken away from magnesium, but calcium is not an issue with them. All right. Thanks for the question. Hello, Rose. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. In monitoring my immune status, my doctor tests my T cells, NK cells. You have said in the past that you don't find that CD57 test is a useful test to do to follow a course of treatment, and that it doesn't give a true prediction of what will happen with that person. What do you think about the other tests mentioned above? Do they provide any indication of progress of the treatment? Thanks. In my experience, they don't. Part of the problem with we as physicians, so I'm going to talk about my colleagues now, is we are taught to rely on tests to tell us what's going on with the person. And we feel better if we have a test that can prove what we're doing is right, okay? But there's not a lot of, we don't have testing truly that's been studied that says you have immune suppression in a way that's hurting your Lyme treatment. It doesn't exist. We don't have studies that really prove that. And so a lot of my colleagues still rely on testing, and I understand that's how we're trained to be in a sense, and we want the testing to guide us. We hope it will guide us, but the reality is we have no outcome studies that relate to what happens with immune markers or immune cell markers has anything to do with what is actually happening with the germs in the body. We just don't. We have no studies that correlate those two. Okay? All right. Thanks for our question, Rose. Hello, Joyce. Hi, Dr. Ross. Let's see here. Let's see. I have chronic Lyme and Bartonella 20 years and following your herbal protocol for several months now and have subscribed to a holistic lifestyle for over 25 years, which closely mirrors your list of suggestions. During the last few years, I have become allergic and are sensitive to several foods, primarily gluten, dairy, and most recently corn and soy, peanuts, and shellfish. I had blood tests yesterday to see if I am becoming autoimmune. Question, what percentage of Lyme patients become autoimmune, and what is the best treatment for addressing this issue? Thank you immensely. So I honestly don't know how many become autoimmune, and I don't even have a sense of it for my practice because I actually don't test for it. But what's going on with you raises a different issue than autoimmunity with me. It raises the question of whether you've developed some mast cell activation, actually. So there is a condition that we're starting to get more and more understanding over the last years called mast cell activation syndrome. And mast cells are the cells in your body where histamines are made. And as you probably know, whenever we have an allergic reaction, we release histamines. They're actually released by your mast cells, okay? So with allergies, for instance, if you're allergic to something and it lands on a mast cell, the mast cell is going to make and release histamines, which give you that whole allergic type reaction. We now know over the last years, based upon research that's been coming out, that Lyme also triggers mast cells to be more active and to more easily release their histamines than they might ordinarily. Mold toxicity can, yeast can, chronic infections can. So sometimes when people with Lyme start getting more reactive and more allergic to things, it may be that the Lyme germ over time and Bartonella over time and mold toxicity and too many yeast in their intestines over time have triggered mast cell activation syndrome. Now, there is some blood testing you can do to look and see if you have that. One is measuring a chemical called tryptase. Another one is measuring prostaglandin D2 levels. One is measuring histamine levels. But often the testing is not going to capture these because you have to, for the test to capture it, you have to be in a raging histamine surge right at the moment they draw the blood, and that often is not happening. All right, so we make more the idea or the decision to treat based on whether you have become more reactive, and a lot of that reaction has allergic type symptoms to it. Okay, all right. So that's one thing for you to consider. I'll show you an article to look at about that. Secondly, if I see somebody that's starting to develop a lot of food sensitivities as they've been treated, I start wondering more actually about leaky gut syndrome, and even more so than I think about mast cell activation syndrome. So leaky gut is something that can develop in your intestines if you develop infection of the lining of the intestines, like getting too many yeast growing in your intestines. Okay, so in the intestines, our healthy cells, the way our intestines work is we have a layer of cells that touch up against each other very tight. And on one side of that layer, you have the inside of the intestines where partially digested food is, toxins, allergic things is. Then you have one layer of cells. And below that layer of cells, you have your blood vessels that run. And what separates this layer of cells from the blood vessels is 60% of your immune system is down here too with immune cells, okay? Now, in fully functioning non-leaky gut, what happens is these cells touch up against each other very tight. There's no gaps in them at all. And the way that things get from the inside of the intestines through all these immune cells that are here and into the bloodstream is they get micro-digested by all the healthy bacteria that's supposed to be there. And only things that are good for us get absorbed into these cells, pass through the cells, through these immune cell filters here and into your bloodstream. And because they're so micro-digested and all that's left of that piece of corn is sugar pieces and amino acids and small pieces of fat that are not distinguishable as corn, they don't get identified as corn down here by your immune cells when they work their way through. Okay, now, if you get yeast growing on top of these cells, or you get a parasite infection growing on top of these cells, you develop what is known as leaky gut. Because what happens is these cells plump up and pull apart, and you get microscopic gaps. Now what can happen is not fully digested food broken down so you can't recognize the original sugar source as corn, but rather microscopic pieces that actually do look like corn wind up getting through here, hit all these immune cells, and immune cells say, aha, that's a piece of corn. Let's react against it. All right? So that's where you start getting this. Okay, so the solution to this kind of a problem is figure out if you have too many yeast, and if you do, treat it, so that these will heal back up and start growing together. Okay, all right. So I would have to ask you a lot more questions, but you've either developed mast cell activation probably, or you've developed leaky gut, and an underlying cause of leaky gut can be having too many yeast living in your intestines. Okay, all right. So let me do some screen shares here because I want to show you some resources that you can look at. All right, so this is back at, where am I? Oh, actually, let me go back here. Oh, there we are. All right. So this is back at my Lyme disease information site, okay? So take a look at my online Lyme guide again. And in terms of the mast cell activation that I was just telling you about, take a look at my immune system chapter here. And take a look at this article called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome in Lyme, okay? And I even describe here what are the things you can take to quiet this down if there's a good chance you have it, okay? All right. In terms of how to approach a leaky gut syndrome and the things you can do to help stabilize your intestine lining while you're getting those yeast out, take a look in my stomach and intestines chapter. And take a look at, where is it? Well, first of all, you could take a look at this article called Leaky Gut Syndrome, a Treatment Guide, okay? And then you can also look at my chapter here, or my article here on how do you identify yeast. And in here, I have a link to the article about how do you treat yeast as well too, okay? All right, Joyce, good luck to you. Thank you for that question. All right, everyone. So that is it for me for tonight. I had a great time visiting with you all. Take a look at your email tomorrow morning, somewhere between 9 and 9:30 a.m. That is my intention to have my project done of getting the video out to you and getting it posted. I do have to apologize. Last week, I did send the email out, but I forgot to make the YouTube recording public instead of private until later in the day. So if you tried that last week, you'll notice that it did not show up until later in the day, actually. But I will remember that. My intention is to actually have it activated so you can see it tomorrow morning too. In tomorrow morning's email, there'll be a link that you can use to sign up for next week's webinar. So feel free to do that. I'd be glad to have you back here again. And if you are finding benefit and value by doing these webinars, please spread the word. My goal is to help as many people as possible with this terrible illness, and you can help me do that. So spread the word. You can either share feel free to share the announcements for the recording. Feel free to share any emails I send out announcing the sign up for the webinars. Spread the word, okay? All right. Thanks, everyone. Good seeing you tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Good night.